Hello, this is Tommy Franks. Welcome to the 4-Star Leadership Podcast, a product of the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum. We're here to get a view into the lives of the legacy makers, the movers and the shakers of today, to offer insights from the full spectrum of the leadership community. We'll talk to former 4-star students and explore their leadership development path. We'll work to find out what they are about today and learn from the opportunities they've made for themselves in this world. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this podcast. Remember, leaders are not born, they're developed.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Core Principles of Leadership podcast with General Tommy Franks. I am your host, Jay Zacharias, and today we have a great guest in the former Lieutenant Governor of Oklahoma, Todd Lamb, where we will be talking about the leadership principles for today and tomorrow that I learned yesterday. But before we get into that, we'll get a quick word from our main sponsor of the podcast, REI Oklahoma. REI Oklahoma is proud to be a part of the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and the production and distribution of these podcasts designed to inspire leaders and difference makers. At REI Oklahoma, we have been working with small business leaders, entrepreneurs, and people who are driven to succeed for years. Highly motivated people working to own their own businesses, live in their own homes, and make the world a better place. Since its beginning, REI Oklahoma has continued to identify hurdles and deliver holistic solutions to create job growth and help neighborhoods thrive in both rural and urban communities. REI Oklahoma looks forward to visiting with you about helping your business and community grow. Visit reiok.org or call 800-658-2823 to start the conversation. And now for the guest of this episode, former Lieutenant Governor of Oklahoma, Mr. Todd Lamb. How are you, Todd?
I'm doing great, Jace. Great to be on the podcast and great to be with you. And I know we got to get into the business, but Jace, I just want to say thank you for your leadership and your service to Tommy Franks Leadership, 4-Star Leadership Institute. What you've done and the time that you've been here has been just absolutely exceptional.
No, thank you. I mean, I got great leaders like you to look up to and learn from. So it's a great situation. I'm very blessed. And we've got a great episode. Todd actually came up with the title of this episode himself really quickly on the spot, and I really enjoyed it. He came up with leadership principles for today and tomorrow that I learned yesterday. And so we're going to go ahead and jump into that. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and jump to Todd and tell us a little bit about your personal life. What was your childhood like? Where did you come from?
As my dad used to say, I discovered America in October of 1971. I was born in Enid. For our friends that are listening out of state or out of the country, that's Enid, Oklahoma, northwest part of the state of Oklahoma. I was born there and raised in Enid pretty much my entire life. I went to McKinley Grade School, Waller Junior High, Enid High, and then Jace, I went to Louisiana Tech University to play college football. And for those sports fans that are listening, you know, a lot of the guys and the gals, the students say, well, why in the world would you go from Oklahoma to Louisiana Tech to play football? Because that's not really every little Oklahoma boy's dream is Louisiana Tech. No offense to that great institution. But my response is this: they were the ones crazy enough to give me a football scholarship.
There you go.
I was a wide receiver back in the day. I used to be fast, Jace, not anymore, but I used to be fast. So I went to Louisiana Tech a couple years and I transferred home. I think I got a little, not homesick, but I was ready to be home.
Right.
From Louisiana. And I transferred to Oklahoma State University. And I was a scholarship guy at La Tech, and I walked on to Oklahoma State and played a little football there. When I say a little football, I stress little. And I enjoyed my experience at Oklahoma State. I'm a big Oklahoma State fan. I married a cowgirl.
There you go.
And we have my wife got an education degree from Oklahoma State. She's a fantastic public school teacher. She teaches at Cashion Public Schools, where our son graduated from. Our son went out of state to Kentucky to play football for a year at a small school called Center College.
Okay.
He is now transferred, and he's at Oklahoma State. He's a sophomore there. And our daughter is a junior in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a great student, straight A student, a great athlete, runs track, plays basketball. She plays just about anything with a ball and to keep score. So we've got a son who's 21 as of this. By the time this podcast airs, he's 21. Our daughter's 17. My wife and I have been married going on 26 years.
Man.
And we got a little place out in the country, Jace. And we've got, about a year ago, we had one small dog that we paid for. Now we have 2 dogs, 2 cats, 3 horses. And we're living the Green Acres life out in the country. And we love it.
I love that reference. For those of our students that don't know, look up Green Acres.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah. I've dated Jace. I dated myself by saying Green Acres. Yeah, so I interrupted you, but give your advice on Googling Green Acres.
Yeah, Google Green Acres and you will find one of the best TV show intros of all time. One of the catchiest theme songs ever. I mean, great show. Great show. I love it. So now you've told us a little bit about the personal side of your life. Tell us a little about the professional. What has been your career? Tell us about that and what you've done.
Well, I've had a varied career, and when I get into these 7 principles that I want to share, as you already mentioned the title, leadership principles for today and tomorrow that I learned yesterday. I'm approaching 50 years of age, and I've had a lot of different stops along my career. When I was at Oklahoma State, I dropped out. I'm a recovering college dropout. And so I dropped out of school to work for a guy named Frank Keating, who was running for governor.
Mm-hmm.
And he was elected. So I served on his campaign staff, served in his administration. And then I'll get into one of these principles, but I was working for this man for about 3 years, and he tapped me on the kneecap one day. We're sitting on a little small aircraft flying around somewhere. And he said, "Hey, Todd, you need to leave my office." And I thought, I'm getting fired, like a friend firing. What's going on? And he said, "No," he goes, "You got a young career, and you're doing things with me the second and third time in your mid-20s or early to mid-20s." He said, "That's not healthy. You need to expand your wings, go out and do something different."
Mm-hmm.
And so this man that I worked for was a former FBI agent, Frank Keating, and he encouraged me to look at the Secret Service. So I did. And he said, "You need to look in the Secret Service because they do everything the FBI does, and they travel the world and protect the president. And there's no education like travel. And protecting the president is a notch on your belt in your resume that nobody can question."
Right.
So long story short, Jace, I got in the Secret Service. I had a great short career. I didn't make a life out of that, but I protected 2 presidents. I traveled the world internationally. I was assigned to portions of the 9/11 investigation. I was involved in counterterrorism. I made numerous arrests in white collar and not so white collar crime. So I enjoyed that, but I didn't see my family enough.
Right.
Again, that's kind of a tease for a principle I'm going to get into. But I left the Secret Service and I did things a little backwards. I went back. I already got my undergraduate degree. I went back to law school after I left the Secret Service.
Really?
And I worked for a United States Senator at the time, Senator Don Nichols. And so I was working full time, going to school during the day, at night, and in the summer, and had our second child. We had our second child while I was in law school.
Right.
It was a crazy time.
I bet.
I practiced law for about a year. Didn't really enjoy the practice of law. I got in the landman business, petroleum land management. Worked for a company in Oklahoma, and I became general counsel, director of the company, and we sold that company in 2018. Kind of in that time frame, I was elected to the Oklahoma State Senate.
Right.
I was elected lieutenant governor, and as lieutenant governor, I don't mean this in a pious way, but I was the only lieutenant governor in the country that was elected to serve as chairman of the National Lieutenant Governors, but also of my party's affiliated Lieutenant Governors Association. Only lieutenant governor to be able to do that. And so here's the news. You always want to hear good news when somebody shares their bio, or you always hear good news.
Right.
I ran for governor of Oklahoma in 2018, and I got my butt beat. And I say that we lost by about just over 2,000 votes. It was a close election, and folks thought we were the heir apparent, and we were going to move right in that governor's mansion. We didn't take anything for granted, but elections have consequences, and we didn't get elected. So I was in the position of thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? And I talked to my wife and prayed about it. Didn't know what we were going to do. We were kind of like Cortez. We approached the shore, got off the boats, and burned the boats because we were turning back in that governor's race. Then you get beat, and God says, you're not going to do what you think you were going to do.
Right.
What do you do?
Right.
You got to kind of release that goal and move on. And that's a principle I'll share in a moment. So without getting into the story, I now work for a security company that is national, and really we have some international clients, and we're full scale security. It's called Tri-Core Security, where we provide physical security, private security guards, electronic surveillance, video cameras, and cybersecurity.
Right.
And I run business development. I'm an in-house attorney, and I also have an ownership in one of our subsidiaries. So that's what I do now, and that's kind of the highlight of my career in the private sector and public sector. And I also try to be a leader in our church. We attend church regularly, and we teach Sunday school, and I serve as a deacon, and we're active there also. But that's the personal, and that's the business right there.
There you go. Both sides of Todd Lamb, ladies and gentlemen. So knowing both of those, now let's connect the dots to General Franks. How did you guys get connected? What was the first time you met him? What is the good General Franks story that got you guys hooked up?
Well, I got a great story, but let me just say again, I know there are some students that are engaged and listening to this podcast. I'm so thankful that you all are listening right now. But I got to be a little bit older than a lot of our listeners. I know we have some gray hairs listening also, but keep in mind, I got to see Tommy Franks in real time. I got to see General Tommy Franks, not retired General Tommy Franks. I saw Tommy Franks giving briefings at the Pentagon. I saw Tommy Franks on TV giving briefings from the command center when he was commanding our operations in the Gulf Coast. So it's a man I saw just as a national hero.
Right.
So then he's coming to my home state to speak to 1,000+ audience. And somebody reaches out to me that's in charge of that group and says, "Hey, Todd, would you be General Franks' driver that evening?" And he's still the general. He's not retired.
Right.
Like, are you kidding me? Do I have to pay you to do this? So I show up at the hotel, and General Franks is there with his military security. And, they're all business, and they weren't impressed at all that I was a former Secret Service agent. They didn't care. And not that they should have. But General Franks gets in the car. He's sitting in the back seat. I've got his security next to me. We're driving to the event. And I thought, I'm not going to miss this opportunity. So I just look in the rearview mirror, and I said, "General, as a American citizen, I just want to say thank you very much for your leadership and your service, not just present day, but what you've done throughout your military history and your career, how you've served our country and what you stand for. I just want to say thank you very much, sir." And he knew my background, apparently. Well, Tommy Franks looked right back in that mirror, and he barked out, as only a general and General Franks can,
"Right.
Thank God, and I want to thank you for your service too." Just think about that for a moment. Here's a guy I'm just impressed with and is a hero.
Right.
And represents what is great about America. He said thank you, but then he turned that around and looked at me and said, "Todd, thank you for your service," which pales in comparison to General Franks and all those that have worn our country's uniform. So that's the first time I met General Franks. And let me tell you, I've had my ox in the ditch a few different times. Every time I've called General Franks or Kathy,
right,
I asked them for help.
Right.
They've been there.
Absolutely.
And they've been there when some others might have said, "I don't think so, Todd."
Right.
I think the world. You take the uniform away, you take all of the recognition away, which is hard to do. But if you think about it in that context, I love Tommy Franks as a man and his wife Kathy and what they stand for and the kind of people they are.
Absolutely. To find a friend with as much character and experiences as General Franks is an absolute blessing. So yeah, that's awesome. So building off of all of that, we know who Todd Lamb is. We know how he got connected with General Franks. Now we're going to get into the leadership principles for today and tomorrow that he learned yesterday. And I'll turn it over to you. I think you've got your list. I've got
mine. All right,
Jace.
Well, let's just start with principle 1, and that's family first. And we got to start at the very beginning. You look at the history of time, the history of civilization. Anytime archaeologists dig up an old community, an old village,
right,
whatever it is, what you're going to find? You're going to find pots and baskets and other artifacts that are reflective and point toward what? A family unit.
Right.
A family union.
Right.
and you look at scriptures, take the Bible, for example, the story of creation,
Right.
the archaeological digs. Here's my point. As you think about that right now, as you're listening to this podcast, the first unit that ever existed in the history of time, the first unit was the family.
Yep.
It wasn't a bank.
Yep.
It wasn't a governmental body. It wasn't the fire department, as important as the fire department is. It was not a police station, as important as that might be. It wasn't a vet with all the animals running around. It wasn't a veterinarian clinic. What was the first unit? The family unit.
Right.
So what that says to me is that family should be a priority.
Absolutely.
Take care of first things first, family first, because, whatever my day might be, whatever it's been in my past jobs and as challenges as my positions may have been and my assignments may have been in the United States Secret Service, the long days I may have had on the campaign trail or the long business meetings I might have now. When I go home, it's a whole different, I'm not in a business setting anymore. I'm not in a government setting anymore. It's with my wife. It's with my kiddos. And that's the most basic, fundamental unit of my life. Now, I'm far from perfect. I come home grouchy. Sometimes I take the office home with me, and I should not.
Right.
I try to remind myself it's not good for man to be alone. So this past week, Jace, is spring break at the Lamb house.
Right.
Our son, he was living his best life. He went to Indianapolis to watch basketball.
There you go.
The tickets to go to Indianapolis. Our team made it to the second round, but we got beat.
Dadgummit.
Was out. My wife and daughter took another family friend, wife and girl. Before them, went to New Mexico to go skiing.
There you go.
I was left all alone.
Oh,
I was reminded again, being a week at my house by myself, why I do not like being by myself.
Oh yeah.
Man to be alone. So I encourage the listeners today, as they go through life. Some might have a family right now. You do have a family. I mean, either you're a child, you're a cousin. There might be some parents listening right now, but particularly these students that are part of this 4-Star Leadership Institute. And as they grapple with and they study and they learn more about character, common vision, communication, and caring, keep the first things first, family first.
Absolutely. And, on top of that, I also challenge our listeners to, find that one role model within your life. And most likely your first role model ever was a family member. And they continue to be that. That person to me in my life is my dad. And, everything that I've been taught in my life and my moral compass that kind of General Franks talks about was crafted, through the help of my father. And so everybody needs to, like Todd said, focus on family, because at the end of the day, that is the only group of people that will always have your back through and through. Now, you might argue, you might disagree at sometimes, I guarantee you butt heads with family here and there, but at the end of the day, they are the one true unit that will always have your back. So absolutely, that's a great starting point for us.
Well, the second point I have for us, Jason, we're going through 7. If you just got part of this podcast, we're going through 7 principles. And the second one is planning. You can call it planning, goal setting, vision. There's a Proverbs that says, where there is no vision, the people will perish.
Right.
Just digest that for a moment. Where there's no vision, the people will perish. Well, that proverb, as old as the proverb might be, it rings so loudly and it's so true. You see it every day. I mean,
absolutely.
If you go to school, I know what it's like to go to high school. I know what it's like to go to college. If you go to school and you have no plan to do your homework, you have no plan to study for that test,
right.
You have no plan to try to make that teacher, that professor pleased with your work.
Right.
That's going to result in a really bad outcome.
Yeah.
Look at General Tommy Franks. I mean, did he ever go into battle from Vietnam all the way to the Gulf and Iraq without a plan? You're surely going to die without a plan.
Right.
In a real battle. So it's important to set goals and to have a plan. And as a leader, you've got to, nobody wants to follow you if they don't know where you're taking them.
Absolutely.
Particularly as you plan, you need to understand the group of people that you're working with, that you're leading, and to set a goal and to have a vision. You really have to understand what the problems are, what the challenges are. If there's a financial challenge in your family, a financial challenge with your company, a financial challenge with a governmental entity that you're working in or serving with. Well, if you know the challenge is financial, the plan and the goal has to be overcoming that challenge.
Right.
A little bit more than, okay, well, Monday we're going to have a staff meeting at 9.
Mm-hmm.
10, we're going to have a marketing strategy session. Okay, we're going to eat at noon. Well, no, what are you going to talk about in the staff meeting?
Right.
The marketing plan when you have your meeting. And are you going to go to lunch just to fellowship and have lunch? Or is you going to have a lunch meeting? And what's on the agenda? So what's on the agenda for your life and what's your plan? Very, very important.
Very important. We had an inspired leadership program last week. Some Fort Sill soldiers came over and they participated in a 2-hour course with us about our inspired leadership program, kind of going over our 4 cores. And a retired Army medic by the name of Matthew Sims was a guest speaker with us. And I loved his take on it. The way you're talking about it with common vision is, he said, if you are too big to do the small things, then you're too small to do the big things. And being able to have a common vision. Yeah. And I give him full credit for that statement. I love it too, but Matt Sims is the one that came up with that and not me. But to be able to have that common vision and say, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to get there. And then probably the hardest part is helping others believe in it. Because if we as leaders aren't believing in the common vision itself, we might be able to point us in the right direction. We might know the exact way to get there. But if we ourselves as leaders who set the tone or help set the tone don't believe in it, then those around us won't either. So I really like kind of how
great point with that belief. There's a real effort of required transparency and sincerity as you set that goal for those that you're following. And I want to focus on transparency and sincerity with selling that vision, that plan, not a manipulation.
Right.
But you know what is good for the organization you're leading or the group of people that you're leading. Surely, wholesome, absolutely the right way to go. We're going to be sincere and transparent in selling that with enthusiasm.
Yes.
Authority, because if you can't do that, why would anybody want to sign and say, you know what? He or she doesn't seem very enthusiastic about it. He or she hasn't told me why we need to do this plan. But this leader, they're pretty demanding about it. So begrudgingly, I'll follow. That's going to set you to a goal. And let me just give you one quick, very general anecdote. When I was in the Secret Service, anytime that we picked up the President of the United States when he was outside of Washington, D.C., and he would arrive at an airport, whether that was an airport in San Francisco or an airport in Florence, Italy, 2 of my many stops in the Secret Service, we had a very detailed plan to get the President of the United States from that airport to the location that he was going to spend the night or the location he was going to give a speech to. San Francisco or Florence, Italy, or anywhere else in the world. A detailed plan.
Right.
Exactly what time the departure was, how many cars were in the motorcade, how many intersections were blocked with police cars, what time we'd arrive at the site, how many people would greet the president when he got off the plane, how many would greet the president when he got out of the car, got out of the limousine at the new event. Very, very detailed plan, because failing to plan is planning to fail.
Absolutely, man. We're already 2 points in, and I mean, I'm excited. This is only getting better as we go. Now, the next point, you have got to give me a little bit of clarity. His next point is surrender. What in the world?
Jace, what? Don't leaders always cry surrender?
General Franks is just absolutely jumping around right now, probably.
Yeah, General Franks is probably calling me right now, about to fire me from my volunteer position on the board of the Tommy Franks Leadership 4-Star Leadership Institute. General, just give me a moment and let me explain surrender.
Right.
And I threw this in there for kind of right now, this might have awoken some of the listeners, that are listening to this podcast. Because surrender is not a character trait you hear from leaders that say, oh, be ready to surrender when you lead.
Right.
Here's what I mean by surrender. In my professional life, I mentioned this introduction. I ran for governor of Oklahoma, and we came up short. And here's what I could do as a stubborn, and at the time would have been foolish, the day after the election. We were 2,000 votes short. I could have foolishly said, okay, team, let's press on. We're still running for governor.
Right.
Some folks would have probably smelled my coffee and wondered, what I've been drinking that morning or what my issues were. Is Todd falling off his rocker? Does he not know that we lost and we cannot go on and continue to run for governor?
Right.
That's what I mean by surrender. Now, I don't mean give up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean if the going gets tough, you just find a different thing to do. That's not what I mean by any stretch of the imagination. But I want to pivot and go in a different direction with surrender to say sometimes your plan as a leader might need to be altered. And this really comes with a lot of life experience. And you learn by watching others and not forgetting where you came from. Think, okay, maybe we need to alter the plan. Maybe we need to alter the goals a little, not because the goings got too tough.
Right.
So, for instance, back to the Secret Service analogy, when I talk about picking up the president from the airport to taking him to the location, whether that was domestic travel or international travel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not laying any secrets out from the Secret Service. I think everybody knows this. This is fairly common knowledge. But the Secret Service, and I did this many times, always has an alternate motorcade route.
Okay.
Always.
Right.
In the Secret Service, you plan for the unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime that I would advance a motorcade route from an airport to a location for the president, you know what else I also advanced? An alternate motorcade route.
Right.
Because, for instance, if we're going all the way down Main Street, and then for whatever reason, a car ran an intersection control, ran through a police barricade, and a car was sitting right there, and we thought there could be a bomb in the car or a person with a gun in the car, we would execute the alternate motorcade route. Mm-hmm. We would surrender to the fact that the plan we had in place needs to be altered. Now, some folks might say, well, that's improvising, not surrendering. Okay, well, surrender grabs your attention.
Right.
If you have a plan, as important as planning is, you might need to go to plan B and surrender to the fact that we need to do a different thing. Or sometimes, and this is very hard for leaders to do, surrender to the fact that you might need somebody else's help.
Absolutely.
You can't do it all by yourself.
Yes.
You can't do it all by yourself.
Yes.
So surrender, I don't mean that to be a 4-letter word, and I don't mean it to wave the white flag, but I mean that to understand and get some life experience and talk to others and seek wise counsel. When plan A is not working and you have to go to plan B, you have to know the right time to pull that trigger and make that happen.
Absolutely. And being adaptable in all situations is so important, because so much of the time we try to find the most easy, simple, straight there solution, when in reality that might not be the most successful route. And then you also touched on the fact that, as leaders, we need to be able to self-reflect and make sure that we never put ourselves in a situation where our ego of, this is the right plan, this is the right way, I've done this before, override the success of what we're attempting to do. And so being able to keep our own egos in check and understand the common vision of, this is where we're going, these are the options of how we can get there, let's come to a consensus of what the best option is and have some plan Bs, like you're saying. And then also being able to be selfless in those moments, even if you are the shot caller, of understanding where everyone's coming from in those moments.
Yeah, it's one of the core principles that you just said is common vision, but also I think it takes a lot of character.
Absolutely.
Because you mentioned the 4-letter word ego.
Right.
I know it's 3 letters, but it's a dirty word. Ego.
Right.
Ego gets you. You got to have the character to have yourself in check.
Yes.
And move on and pivot if need be.
Yes, and being able to be self-aware as a leader is probably one of the hardest things to learn as you go along, from what I've been told and just in my experience, because there's so many times where you've done it before. You've been there, you've done it. Right. Same old. Yeah. And you just, this is the way, this is how it works. That's y'all follow. Come on. When in reality, to always be able to have open ears and not let yourself get too confident within yourself and your experiences, that will allow you to gain respect amongst your group, as well as,
Absolutely.
Fluidity with how communication is. Because how do some people feel if you immediately shut them down on an idea, they're probably not going to want to speak up as quickly. So being able to have that fluid conversation back and forth in those situations is so
not
important.
shutting them down. And the surrender part of understanding, you may not be the smartest person in the room.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
okay. You can still be the leader and surrender to the fact that you may not be the smartest person in the room. You're still the leader, but you need to be smart enough, wise enough to bring somebody else's idea. And one more analogy I'll make on that. I know we're listening to this podcast a few days later, but we're still in the middle of March Madness. And even if you listen weeks or months later, even if you're not a basketball fan, March Madness is just a phenomenon of athleticism.
Absolutely.
The teams that do the best, Jace, in the tournament, the teams that often do the best are those that make the halftime adjustments. Yep. Why do they make the halftime adjustments? Because the game plan they had counted on, the plan they had counted on, is not working to the level they need it to work. So they're going to make an adjustment. They're going to surrender and say, hey, the game plan, watered up, out the window, new game plan. Here's how we're going to tweak it.
Yep.
You got to do that. So that's 3 points. Leadership lessons for today and tomorrow that I learned yesterday: family first, plan, surrender. And the next one, this will be pretty quick. Attend the herds. Attend the herds.
Okay.
Now, let me just assume for a moment, Jace, we have some friends. I know we have many listeners, probably more listeners outside the state of Oklahoma than inside the state of Oklahoma. This is not Oklahoma-centric. Tommy Franks is an international figure.
Right.
Every time I've spoken to the Leadership Institute in the summer, I've met at least 1 or 2, sometimes 4 or 5 students from the Middle East. I know this is international, so I'm not trying to make it Oklahoma-centric. But let me say this. I'm not talking about attend the herds as a present-day farmer or rancher.
Right.
But let's look back in the history of time again. One of the first occupations in civilization was a shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
A shepherd.
Yep.
And think about the shepherd and what a shepherd is, present day, but really just in ancient times. The shepherd had to attend the flocks.
Mm-hmm.
The shepherd just didn't look at the sheep or the cattle or the stock and say, hey, follow me. I'm the guy, I'm the human being. I'm going to walk around and I'm smarter than all you sheep. Just follow me because I'm telling you to follow me. You know why the sheep follow the shepherd? Because he attended to them.
Yep.
He had a staff. He had a shepherd's crook. Some had slingshots. And they didn't take the sheep too long to figure out that this guy that's walking around on 2 legs, is a lot taller than all of us. He seems to be here to protect us.
Right.
He's tending to our needs.
Right.
If a little lamb ran away, that shepherd would leave 99 and go get that one lamb because he cared for that one lamb.
Right.
If a wolf or a prowler came by, a bear came by, that shepherd would fend off that prowler, that bear, that wolf, and protected the sheep. As leaders, we have to do the same thing. Outside of what that common vision might be, outside of what your goals might be for your organization, the men and women that are part of your organization, you have to care about their needs.
Absolutely.
Not their needs that are just going to help you achieve your goal and the group's goal, but care about them as people, about individuals. And that's the first thing, and that's the first principle of the 4 core principles of leadership: character. Be a man, be a woman, regardless of your age, regardless of your station, a man and a woman of character that cares for the basic needs of people.
Yep.
Ask them how their family is. Ask them if there's anything you can do for them. Outside of your organization, outside of what you're doing together to work toward a common vision, how are you? How was your day? How was your weekend? You said fine. Was it really fine?
Right.
Ask the people around you this question. Alone. Anything keeping you up at night?
Right.
A real nice way to say, what's bothering you that I can help you with?
And whenever
relationships, tend the herds.
Right. And when you're in those situations, especially as the subordinate, and I don't really like that word, but let's just say you have a leader that you look up to, the 2-minute conversation that it might be that someone takes out of their day to genuinely ask how you are, not the passing you by through the hallway, actually sitting down and saying, hey, how are you? Like you said, what's keeping you up at night? When you feel as though you are cared about by those around you, it immediately makes you want to work harder and care equally about them. Because forget work. If we're humans for just a second and let the hustle and bustle of everything go to the wayside, and you care about the people around you everybody's had a bad boss. Everyone's had a boss that they're just like, God, they just keep me going all the time. They could care less. And then you get that one great leader in your life, and you just work so much harder because they care for me. So I'm going to deliver for them in the same way.
And another way to say that, you've heard this before, Jace, maybe some listeners haven't. People don't care how much you know.
Right.
Until they know how much you care.
Right. Oh, that's good. Very good.
People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
Get to know the people that you are working with, that you might be leading. Attend to the hurts.
Man, very, very good. We're going to take a quick break, Todd. I know we're having an awesome time. Let's go ahead and throw it over to a quick sponsorship spot real quick, and we'll be back with Todd Lamb to get our last 3 key points in. Hello, this is Jay Zacharias with the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum, and I would like to tell you about one of our partner sponsors. His name is Justin Krieger, and he has worked as an independent insurance agent at Krieger Insurance Agency in his hometown of Hobart, Oklahoma since 1999. Justin is honored to help with the annual Celebration of Freedom event and has been a board member for the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum for many years. He is also a 5th-generation farmer and rancher in Kiowa County, where cattle, crops, and even insurance is sold with a handshake. Give him a call at 580-726-3076, or come by the office if you would like to speak with Justin Krieger or Kathy Langford about insurance. We are thankful to our customers and friends who have supported us through the years. Again, Justin would like to say how honored he is to live in such a great country and how proud he is to help sponsor these podcasts. Please enjoy the rest of this podcast experience from your friends at Krieger Insurance Agency. We are back with Todd Lamb going over the leadership principles for today and tomorrow that I learned yesterday. We've already gone over family first, planning, surrender, and to tend the herds. We got be humble next, and I'll just let you run with it.
You mentioned the word ego earlier and how dangerous ego can be, and I can agree with you more, Jace. But humility, my dad used to say, I lost my dad in January 2018, and he was my greatest encourager. And I love that man to death, and I miss him every day.
Absolutely.
So thankful I still have my mom with us, but I miss my dad. But my dad often said, be nice to the little people. And that almost doesn't sound right in today's world where we're kind of hypersensitive and we rush, not we, but many people rush to the front of the line to say we were the most offended. So Dad never put anybody down. And my dad grew up in Southwest Oklahoma. He was born in Canute, small town, very small town. Very and my dad used to say he grew up just very, very dirty and very poor. That's how my dad grew up. And I think because of my dad's upbringing, he really went out of his way to be nice to the little people, not in a derogatory, like the little, no.
Right.
Those that can do nothing for you.
Right.
That's what my dad taught me. Those that can do nothing for you. How do you treat them?
Right.
Somebody that might, be able to give you some money or donate to your cause, or somebody that might be able to give you a job or give your spouse a job, or somebody that might be able to open a door for you. Well, it's not real hard to be nice to them.
Right.
It's not. And it can be even genuine, sincere, of course.
Yes.
I'm not saying that's disingenuous, but those can do nothing for you. So years ago, I was in college and I played a little college football, and I was invited to be a coach at the Dallas Cowboy Jay Novacek football camp. Now, we've had some Google assignments already. I want the students that may not be familiar with Jay Novacek, Novacek, Novacek. He was a tight end that played football at the University of Wyoming, played for the Dallas Cowboys, phenomenal tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. So I went to coach at this football camp. And the first day of camp, I was responsible for about 8 to 10, fourth graders. I mean, they're little kids. And
right.
They're great. And I didn't know that was going to be my responsibility when I signed up to coach at the camp.
Right.
But nonethelelse, I did. That was my assignment. Right. And so I was kind of the counselor of the door. I would walk them to practice and, coach them. And so the first night, Jace, I got this one kid who's pretty loud. And I didn't think we'd see Jay Novacek until like the last day, for pictures. Right. I thought that's when Novacek would show up. What do I know? So we're out there on the practice field stretching the first night of practice. Camp's about a week long. And I got this one kid that spots Jay Novacek. I'm shocked Jay Novacek is at his own football camp. This kid yells out, Jay, hey, Jay. This kid of mine, he's on the 20-yard line stretching. Jay Novacek is the other 20-yard line.
Right.
Jay, hey, Jay. What, Jay? I mean, wants to get Jay Novacek's attention.
Right.
And Jay probably can't hear him, and that's fine. And I'm thinking, kid, I want him to like me, so I'm not getting on to him yet. Hey, stop yelling at Jay Novacek. He'll make his way around this week.
Right.
We're doing some drills. Jay Novacek walks by about 20 minutes later. This kid, Jay, hey, Jay, we're going to order Domino's pizza. Jay, hey, Jay, we're going to order Domino's pizza tonight in our room, 108. Will you come by? I mean, he's that kind of kid.
Right.
Jay kind of looks at him, kind of smiles, non-committal as he should not have been.
Right.
So I'm not gonna torture our listeners and repeat that, but just know about every 20 minutes throughout practice that evening, and at the mess hall when we had dinner after practice, when this kid was within earshot of Jay Novacek, the Dallas Cowboy tight end, this kid yelled and said, Jay, pizza 108 later tonight. This kid, he's that kid. We all know that kid. He's that kid.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right. So it's bed check time.
Right.
Oh, and at dinner, Jay Novacek looks at the kid and says, what time? He goes, we're right before lights out. We're going to order Domino's pizza. Lights out.
Right.
Okay. Jay said, I'll be there.
There you go.
Well, I got to be honest with you, Jace. I was disappointed in Jay Novacek because I thought, that's not right. You get this kid's hope up. I mean, he's not going to be here that late. And that's just,
right.
I was disappointed.
Right.
You know, one of my spiritual gifts is judging. And so I judged him. And so I'm doing a check. I go in the first room, not a kid to be found. Supposed to be 2 kids in there. Not a kid to be found. I thought, well, this is a problem. I'm going to have to find 2 kids before their parents pick them up in a week.
Right.
I go to the next room. No kids in there. Well, because more concerning. Okay. All right. I'm 0 for 4 the first night of football camp. Go to the next room. There's 1 kid in 1 bed. Next bed's empty. Okay. So I make my way down the hall and I get to room 108. It's lights out. I get to room 108. There's light creeping under the door.
Right.
And I hear, kids bumping into the dresser, rambunctiousness, and I hear some laughter. I'm like, well, I got to go in as the heavy because I got to establish authority first night of football camp.
Right.
So I grab that doorknob, I twist it, and I step in the door, kind of like I'm the coach and lights out, everybody get to bed.
Right.
Stepped in that door, stepped in that room, and there were about 10 third graders, 4th graders sitting on top of, sitting next to, eating pizza with the tight end for the Dallas Cowboys, Jay Novacek. And I still get torn up talking about this.
Right.
Because it struck me.
Yep.
And I've never forgotten it. These kids could do nothing for Jay Novacek. Paying the little football camp fee did not affect Jay Novacek's tax bracket.
Right.
It had no economic impact on him whatsoever.
Right.
They could not sign him to a new deal for the Dallas Cowboys. But Jay Novacek had enough integrity to care about people that could do nothing for him. He walked in humility. He acted humble. And that first night of football camp, those campers, their camp was made because Jay Novacek took time to talk to them, eat pizza with them, and be humble and to hang out with a bunch of kids. So whether it's kids or coworkers, the custodian, the groundskeeper, somebody that you may not work with directly and cannot impact your life whatsoever, how do you treat them? Yep. How humble are you?
Absolutely. And, like you said, like that story just hits you right in the heart even now. And I mean, it shows the selflessness and it gives you a benchmark I guarantee you left that camp and it just kind of rang your bell even of, man, how can I be better now after seeing that? And that's what leadership does. It elevates us all. I mean, whenever you see that example from one person, I saw an article the other day that said that on average, you don't realize it, but in one way, shape, or form, on average, you influence about 10,000 people a year.
My goodness.
And I mean, that could be in a passing glance. I mean, and it's probably a lot higher in those situations, but just knowing that if you are humble and selfless all the time and you make that a part of your character, not I'm going to be selfless today, I am going to make selflessness and being humble a part of my character through and through, that will only have a positive return on everyone around you, and it'll elevate them as well.
Impact you for a long time. Well, that's the fifth principle I wanted to share. I've only got two more, and hope I'm not losing the listeners. I know they're like, hey, get these last two, Todd. I want to get these last two down. We did family first, planning, surrender, attend the herds, be humble. This next principle is really similar to what General Franks shares when he talks about the advice his dad gave him at the train station. Mm-hmm. But number 6 is say yes.
Right.
The golden rule is doing to others as you would have them doing to you.
Right.
And I've told people I work with now, but I also said this when I was in public life. When I was lieutenant governor, I told my staff, the reason people call this office is because everybody else told them no.
Right.
Anybody that has an issue in a state or in a governmental issue, they don't think I'm going to call the lieutenant governor. They think I'm going to call a senator. I'm going to call a representative. I'm going to call the governor. I'm going to call the tax commissioner. I'm going to call the cabinet secretary or I'm going to call that office or department. Nobody says I'm going to call the lieutenant governor. They're calling our office, I would tell my staff, because everybody told them no. Mm-hmm. In government work, the easiest answer for a bureaucrat to give a constituent is no. That's an easy answer because no more work's required. Mm-hmm. I'm not knocking bureaucrats. I'm knocking the ones that say no when they shouldn't say no. Right. So here's what I told my staff, Jace. When people call this office, our goal is to find a legal, ethical, creative way to say yes.
Right.
We want to bend over backwards. If somebody has an issue with the Veterans Affairs, with the Agriculture Department, with the Tax Commission, with the Highway Department, whatever the issue might be, if they're calling this office, we're the office of last resort for them. We're going to do everything we can within our power. We want to do it legally. We want to do it ethically. Sometimes you got to be creative to get there.
Right.
We want to do everything we can do to tell people yes, because no is too easy because no more work's required.
Absolutely.
Say yes to people. And
I think that reflects your character so much because, like you said, at the end of the day, it's so much easier to say no. It's no more work on you. Yeah, you don't have to worry about it. But if everyone was as selfless and aware and had the character that you exemplify in that story, if you serve others, people remember that. There's not, I guarantee there's not hardly anyone that ever reached out to you and that you gave them help that can say very, very negative things about you because you are Todd Lamb through and through. I mean, you are.
We always tried. We always tried. And if you want to lead, what that means, and we've talked about this, being caring, communicating with others, common vision speaks to this, but also your character. Mm-hmm. Leadership isn't saying, I'm going to tell you what to do and you're going to do it because I'm your leader.
Right.
Leadership, it's servant leadership. If you're leading others, you're serving others.
Yes, sir.
That's what you're doing.
Yes,
you're serving them with a plan. You're serving them attending their herds. You're serving with them, by how you treat your family. Serving them by saying yes to them. Serving. Absolutely. And being humble all the way. So I got one last point.
Go for it.
Last point. Number 7. Encourage.
Right.
The world needs more encouragers.
Absolutely.
I mean, positive reinforcement. I think a lot of the young people today, and I'm talking from, toddler to right out of college.
Right.
Those that are most successful, now there are exceptions. There are always anomalies, but those that are most successful are the ones that have been encouraged.
Absolutely.
And leaders, this isn't 100%, but leaders more often than not are men and women who encourage. Now,
Right.
you said earlier, we've all experienced and know bad bosses or people that we don't like to be under their authority. Yeah, there are plenty of those,
Right.
plenty of those. But the people you want to be around are those that encourage you, and
Yep.
not false, not feigning encouragement.
Right.
You mean compliments. Hey, you're a great guy. Hey, you're swell.
Right.
Hey, guy, you're good. No, hey, that project you're working on, you did that really well, particularly this part right here. You've just taken over this responsibility, this assignment, and it's new to you. But what struck me was how diligent you were in your effort in that task and how you met every deadline and got everything in time. If there was a little hiccup, that this issue could have been resolved differently, probably in a better fashion, if you maybe reached out to me or reached out to this person in this office or this organization or at our school. So there's a way to even not chide, but a way to correct behavior in an encouraging fashion. You did A so very well. You could have done B just as well if you spent as much time on B as you did A. I mean, there's a way to even correct behavior in an encouraging fashion. But, I think cheerleader has a negative connotation where you're just, clapping and whatever happens, we're going to be happy about it. We're going to cheer for it.
Mm-hmm.
But cheerlead your organization, cheerlead your effort. And that goes back to something else we talked about that I don't have as a separate, I could have as a separate point, but I don't. But, and we talked about enthusiasm.
Right.
When you encourage your enthusiasm and you make people want to be around you, you make people want to follow you out of sincerity and with that transparency that we also already talked about. But, probably one of the greatest speakers of all time was the Apostle Paul. Mm-hmm. And I know this isn't a Sunday school lesson, and I know that we probably have Christians listening to this podcast, Muslims listening to this podcast, and maybe other men and women that have faith or don't have a faith.
Right.
So, but just hang with this analogy for a moment. Paul, he was a man who was once named Saul that persecuted people of faith.
Yep.
Persecuted them.
Right.
Physically persecuted them.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had a conversion experience and changed his name. His name was changed from Saul to Paul. And he became one of the most gifted speakers in the era of the new church. Well, Paul, everybody talks about Paul, but they forget one guy. There was one guy hanging around Paul. His name was Barnabas.
Right.
Barnabas' name means son of encouragement. So everybody was scared to death of Paul, even after this quote unquote conversion experience, because Paul would go to speak somewhere and the faith leaders would be like, oh, hold on, that's Paul. He's the persecution guy. Let's stay away from Paul. Barnabas said, hold up. I vouch for him.
Right.
Barnabas looked at Paul and said, Paul, come with me. I'll take you to my friends and introduce you around.
Right.
Hey, Paul, come with me. They rejected you. I'm going to go introduce you again and tell them you're my friend.
Right.
So as much as we've heard about Paul, where would he be without an encourager?
Absolutely.
There might be some wonderful leaders in our world who didn't have encouragement, but I doubt it. Right. So to the folks listening to this podcast, if you heard nothing else I say today, I hope you hear this point. Be an encourager. It takes more energy to be negative than it takes to be positive. So, Jace, thank you for allowing me to visit with you today. And that's what I have for my presentation. And if folks want to hit me up on Twitter, it's I don't do Snapchat. For those that are so into Snapchat, I'm not that cool. But I do have a Twitter handle, and it's at Todd G Lamb, and that's Todd with 2 D's. Todd G Lamb. I'm pretty thick-skinned, so you can say I'm all wet on these 7 principles, or you can hit me up, ask me a question, or do anything you want. But that's how you can reach out to me.
Man, we appreciate you taking the time so much and your leadership principles. And I challenge everybody to self-reflect and identify these within your life. And if you feel as though maybe some of these aren't as evident in your life as you wish, work on that. Continue to get better, continue to grow. But man, we just appreciate you taking the time, Todd. Where can people find out more about Tricor? Tell the listeners where they might be able to go and find out more about Tricor.
We got a website. It's pretty easy to find, tricor.com, and it's like Marine Corps. The S is silent. TRICORP as in Paul, S. Tricor.com is our web domain, and I've got an email address on there. And like I said, you hit me up on Twitter, ask me any questions, or direct message me. But that's our website.
Man, a good friend of General Franks, the Leadership Institute Museum, Todd Lamb. I thank you so much for the time, and we'll talk with you soon. Okay.
All right, Jace. Good to visit with you. Thank you.
Thank you again to REI Oklahoma for making this podcast possible. For nearly 40 years, the board, staff, patrons, and supporters of the nonprofit economic development REI Oklahoma are committed to expanding Oklahoma's economic prosperity, earning the reputation of being one of the most comprehensive economic development organizations in the country. Business loans, training workshops, business consulting, and networking opportunities, as well as technical assistance and even commercial business space, are made available to Oklahoma entrepreneurs and small businesses. For low and moderate income individuals and families, down payment and or closing cost assistance is offered. Learn more at reiok.org. This has been the 4-Star Leadership Podcast. Now it's your turn, 4-Star listeners. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what you thought of this episode. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast, and tune in next month for our next episode that airs every last Friday each month. Go be great.